Hello, good morning. Welcome to the fourth episode of the show Exploring Automation, where we ask each other questions about automation and learn from each other's experiences. I'm Lavanya Mohan, and with me is Ajay Balamurpas. Hi, Ajay.
Hello everyone. Good morning, Lon.
Good morning. Okay, usually Ajay is the one who starts by asking questions, and he has a lot of questions. But this time I thought maybe I will start with the first question. So, first question to you, Ajay, a general one, is how do you feel after three sessions of this and continuing to the fourth one today?
Uh, Good. I am learning about automation. I'm loving this discussion. It is helping me uh, think through, learn what I'm not doing, how I can implement back in my projects. So, thank you. Good, and especially the comments and the questions, the encouragement that we have received. It feels good.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say thank you for doing this so early in the morning. It's usually 5:30 or 6 for you. And it's a great learning opportunity for me as well. So thank you. Thanks to you. Okay, so now I'll start with a question about around test automation. Um, so a lot of times, many people in the industry, it's possible that they did not really get a chance to work on automation or automation related projects. Maybe they've been working for, like in this industry for maybe 10, 15 years now, but don't really have a lot of experience in test automation. And maybe they have a dilemma right now that what should they do? Is it too late to start learning automation, or maybe they're already in managerial positions, so they don't know whether they need to learn it anymore, or do they want to? Will they be able to? And maybe a lot of questions like that. So, what would you have to say to folks who have this kind of a dilemma? Ajay?
Right. So 10 to 15 years experience is invaluable. Uh, Nowadays, there are very few people who understand the importance of that 10 to 15 years experience. Right. So, if you have 10 to 15 years of experience, don't think it is waste, even if you have not done automation. Trust me. In the next few minutes, I will tell you how you can use that experience to help teams that are hands-on automation and are involved in automation projects. Many a times, many people forget that automation projects are also projects and involve people. And when you talk about projects and people, there are multiple things outside or also play an important role in the success of the automation project. Things like planning, communication, collaboration, estimation, raising red flags, communication with the stakeholders, reporting to the internal stakeholders, to the external stakeholders, to the clients. Um, what happens if there is a problem, or how do you or how do you highlight the risk? The risk. Have you planned for the mitigation? Do you know which one to pick? Right. With your experience, that is what will help someone who doesn't have that experience of working on multiple projects. Now you might have that fear slash um, anything, any feel that stops you from saying, "Oh yes, I can contribute to automation." Right, but then if you feel, "Oh, I don't know automation," that's fine to some extent. You at least know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Contribute in other areas, and for automation. Uh, a time that is late to start automation. Late According to whom? Late as per what? If you think your career is 16 years old, or it is going to 16 or 20 years old, of course, 15 years already spent, 5 years left. Yeah, it might be late. If you think your career is 45 years old, it's one third. You still have 30 years more, right? So it depends on how long you think your career is. Many a times I remember what Rahul Verma said in Tribal Conf. Yeah, don't confuse your journey with the journey of the testing industry.
Mm-hmm.
Testing industry's journey and tester, your journey, are slightly related, but are not like super totally related, right? So they are like parallel tracks, I would say. So don't confuse your journey with the industry's journey. Automation has been there for quite a long time, right? Even in 2006, 2007, when I started, people were automating using Silk. I don't remember the full name of the tool, but there was a tool called Silk. Then we saw Selenium coming in. Right? And when it came, they said, I mean, they did not say that, but many people thought automation will replace everything. I'm still there. I'm still earning a full-time salary, right? So, as someone who is experienced, remember that there is a lot to contribute in terms of the project. And the second part of the question, should I learn automation? Please do go ahead and learn. Right? There are so many resources available now, right? And maybe if you have questions, ask here. We will try to get you answers. Excuse me. Right. And it again comes down to self-learning. If you can't achieve, say, books is hard, change the path, not the goal. Just like if you're going to some place, you get a traffic jam. You don't change the destination, you change the route.
Right.
Same way, try videos. Not working, try books. Books not working, try one-to-one coaching with someone. One-to-one is not working, try self-paced. Right? Try hands-on first. Try with the basics first. Uh, you know, listen to videos, or get onto a video and ask someone question and learn from them. Right? So again, or okay, if you are with your team who is hands-on automation, observe them, learn. Okay, what are they doing? What first day maybe learn. Oh, this is a project. This is how they commit code. Oh, this is called code review. That's fine, right? But don't give up. Continue, and within 10-15 days, you will know that, oh dear, what you thought was a black box, what you thought was a danger box, is no longer that. It is easy. Right? In your 15 years career, you have seen so many projects. This is yet another project with a slightly different flavor. Embrace it.
Right. I really like these points. Very, very nice. It actually reminds me of one example that I saw. So one of my direct reporting managers was somebody who had similar years of experience, but didn't really have enough experience in test automation as such. One of the things that she did, which I personally really liked, is she acknowledged that she doesn't know and she wants to learn. And and what she did next was she said, "Hey, you know what? Our team is not really having a lot of learning sessions. That's important in any team. So let's do this." And in those learning sessions, well, it could be multiple topics, but also maybe some of them could be dedicated to test automation. And and it involved everyone. It involved the developers. It involved testers. It involved anybody like who just wanted to learn maybe whatever was happening happening in that session, and a lot of it was very hands-on. So eventually, I think, like in a few months, a lot of us had understanding of a lot of other things which we had not really, which we didn't know. And also, the manager also would, try do hands-on, and she would get errors. She would ask about errors. She would go back home, read a little more, and then come back and ask more questions around that. And it was great. And actually, uh, with that, the thing that I really like is a lot of times, right? Maybe some of us who've probably done it for some time don't think enough of when she questions, we would say, "Oh, I didn't really think of that. I don't really know. Let me check now." Right? And
Right.
and and that was I think it was great for the entire team. I think all of us loved it. And so she was not really afraid of saying that, hey, I have not done this in the past. And she was not afraid of asking, well, let's say subordinates or whatever, it like that term, the feeling that usually people have. She was not afraid of asking them to help her explain a few concepts either. And the thing is, then I felt like more people in the team, especially the ones who joined more recently, right, were less afraid of asking questions because of that, because they saw leaders, lead the path. They saw leaders do that, and they thought it's okay. Now I can also ask questions. Nobody's going to judge me for it. And I think it overall the team benefited a lot because of this.
Right. So that's like working like a team rather than, okay, I will not tell you what I don't know, but then I will expect you to know everything. That won't work. You will soon. I mean, everyone will soon find out what you know and what you don't know. It is better to accept, but not stop there. Put in the effort to learn, and team will appreciate. They will appreciate from your experience. I mean, they will gain from your experience. You will gain from the current challenges that they are learning, going through. And the best part is, in technology, nothing stays forever. So everyone almost starts from the same level. Just that you have the 15 years experience of working in projects. You start with that, whereas someone is starting with 2 to 3 or 4 to 5 years of experience. Right? So don't give up. You can do it.
Nice. Okay, would you want to go ahead and ask some next question?
Yes. So we had the automation across layers session last time. So there was a question on the pyramid, test pyramid, right, or the test automation pyramid. What are your thoughts on that?
So the pyramid basically says that you have more tests at the lower levels. So more tests at, let's say, the unit level. Like the simplistic pyramid would say more tests at unit level, followed a little more lesser number of tests at integration or system level, even lesser at the UI level. So that's how it looks. Is like that, right? It looks like a pyramid. And I personally like that concept because um, more tests at unit level would mean that your base is stronger. And the advantage of more tests at unit level would be a couple of things that we already spoke about, right? It would be fast. The cost of writing tests is also easier, as in it's faster to write tests. So faster to run tests and faster to write tests also. Because maybe you're mocking a lot of different dependencies as well. Then uh, since the moving parts are lesser, the tests are not all that flaky, right? In a higher level test, in a UI related test, for example, there are a lot more uh, moving parts. So it's possible that something somewhere breaks and that causes the test to fail. But in a unit, like moving parts are lesser, so it's usually not flaky or more consistent in that sense. Right? Um, then if a unit test fails, it's just very easy to know what could have caused the failure because you're just looking at a very small piece of code which has failed. So pinpointing, as Ajay had mentioned last time, I think that's one of the like very big advantages. So, so again, like having a lot more tests, which are at the lower levels of the test pyramid, will give us all these different benefits. And then as we move higher, we would have so as we move higher, right, they are more like business facing tests. So more tests according to business journeys. And when a higher level test fails, it's probably a good indication of how the end user might be affected. Like when a unit fails, we probably don't realize how the end user might be affected. I mean, maybe not, we can't see the larger picture immediately. But when a higher level test fails, there is that advantage that we know exactly which area it has impacted, like in the for a in terms of the users, like in terms of how user would experience it. So that is like it gives us a value from business side, business facing test. So we would call it business facing test, right? Uh, but there could be flaky, there could be there are many more dependencies. We need to ensure that everything is in place. So having lesser number of tests,
Yes.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Lanya. I'll have to be back in a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Just. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so as we go higher up, the tests probably take longer to run. They since there are a lot of moving parts, they could be flaky and so on. So the number of tests at the higher levels should be ideally lesser, so that like we don't spend a lot of time in dealing with, let's say, a huge test suite which fails multiple times. I remember reading in I think that was James Sparks' blog, which was around context-driven approach to test automation, and in that there was a thing that was written which said, like, this is also a project, and we almost need somebody who can look at it full time to do to have this working. Especially that becomes even more, I guess, if we have uh, hundreds and thousands of tests at the UI level, because they might just fail randomly, and then you're looking at whether it's a real failure or something else, and a lot of time goes into that kind of mode, which we maybe not don't really want, because the idea of having test automation in the first place was to get fast feedback and uh, to help you move faster, to help your project, like you make faster releases and all that. But if you're spending a lot of time just trying to debug if that was a genuine failure, if it was a flaky test issue, whatever, then it really doesn't help you with fast feedback or anything like that. And oftentimes it could also make you feel that, hey, that test really it fails occasionally, so never mind, it must be, the functionality must be fine. But then that moment when you like that time where you take a decision that, hey, functionality is fine, it's just flaking for some failing for a flaky related reason, and you ship, you realize that, oh, that functionality was actually broken, right? But basically people lose confidence in the test if it is flaky, and they just like almost feel like, hey, we don't really get are getting value from that. So that's why I think the test pyramid concept itself came up, to ensure that you have more tests at the lower level, which will be fast and give quick feedback and pinpoint exact locations of the error. And as you go up, lesser test, but it can give you like a user facing sort of business value. uh, and and I've worked on teams where we had, well, we didn't really count the number of tests at whatever levels, but it was more or less like a pyramid shape. We had more tests at the lower level and lesser as we go up. And I've seen that it worked very well for us. Uh, but again, I think there was another blog that was shared post that question, which was about inverted test pyramid. And the blog spoke about a situation in which the team inherited some legacy code, and there were absolutely no tests at the unit level, no tests anywhere actually. And for them, it was difficult to write unit tests because maybe the methods were too long and were doing too many things, and it just wasn't easy. So to start with, for legacy code, what that team did, and actually I also worked on like one small legacy part where we also did a similar approach, is well, we knew that we can't write unit tests very easily at this point. So we wrote the end-to-end UI level test for some of those scenarios. And so that sounds like an inverted pyramid, right? Because now you have the test at the top, but nothing at the bottom. Sorry?
No, I said the UI tests are more now.
Correct.
Compared to the unit.
Correct. So it sounds like an inverted pyramid. But what we did eventually is, now since we had one layer of test already, then we started refactoring the code so such that we could start adding unit tests, and then eventually start adding integration tests. And when we started adding those tests, we just removed tests from the end-to-end layer later.
End-to-end.
Yeah. So in some cases we might have to do that. Though like the ideal case would be to start with a lot of unit tests, but it's possible that sometimes beyond our control that something like this has happened. So we could still start with end-to-end tests, but then eventually move to more unit tests. So that's nice. One of the options.
So so you did mention about flakiness multiple times in this question. Right? So first question, what is flakiness? And with respect to test automation or automation in testing. And the second, is it?
Ajay, I didn't hear the second part of your question at all. The video just froze. I couldn't hear.
Right. So if it is not good, how do we get rid of flakiness?
Okay. So flaky tests basically mean that let's say without any code change, the test passes once, but if you rerun it, maybe it fails. So since there is no change in code, ideally this test should have just always consistently given us the same result. But sometimes it passes and sometimes not. There could be multiple reasons for this. Our setup itself could be a reason. That let's say we're asserting, let's say, on data, but then the data keeps changing because somebody is exploring using the same environment and then actually making changes to data. So that could be some reason, right? Like our setup, which includes, let's say, data, which includes like the servers, for example. So in end-to-end tests especially, we are dependent on real servers. But let's say that the servers went down for some reason. In testing environment, maybe we don't have like huge boxes like we would have in production, right? Maybe it takes lesser load and something like that happens and the servers are down, for example. So it could be a lot of these reasons for which the test fails, but it shouldn't. And there could be multiple factors, like even network conditions. Let's say sometimes the internet in your office, for example, is a little slow on that particular day, and maybe the test fails because of that. So basically, a flaky test would be something which fails at one point, but there is no code change and it fails. It passes the next time. So it's not the application error in that case. In that sense, it would be the way we have maybe written the test, or maybe just at that particular point something like network was not working well enough. Now dealing with flakiness, that's really very tricky. I think so. There is no real one answer that you should do this and flakiness will be gone, right? Because there are multiple reasons that happen. So one of the very important things is to actually try to debug why it is happening. So let's say that So it actually sometimes could even be an application error. I think I didn't speak about that, but let's say that there is some race condition because of which at some point, because of some conditions, that particular thing doesn't work in the application. But remaining times, let's say 99% of the times it works. But then for a particular race condition, maybe it doesn't. Uh, so it could even be an application error. So for flakiness, again, first important thing is to debug and understand why it is failing or when it is failing. And for this, maybe we could add multiple logs. We could, like not just logs and tests like what was done, but also maybe get the application logs at that particular point to see a little more. Maybe just log the load on the servers at that particular point of time, or maybe just log the speed, internet speed at that particular time when we were running the test, or something like that. So some amount of debugging will have to be like we'll have to go into that. We could also look at our strategies, like in terms of what locators are we using to detect the elements. Is it some expert that could change because of like another pop-up that came up, which comes up sometimes, or is it something else? So we could check all those like locator-related strategies that we are using as well. Um, let's say that it could also be sometimes to do with the time it takes to load an element. So maybe the element is present, but it loads after, let's say, 10 seconds, but we were just asserting and waited at max for 5 seconds. So it could be something to do with timing as well. And when it is timing related, well, just increasing the wait time is probably not the best option, because we need to think about, like, oh, if we have to increase the wait time to 30 seconds, would the user really wait that long? Maybe not. So maybe even though the element is available after 30 seconds and we can make the test go green by just making it wait for 30-40 seconds, but maybe the user will not wait. They'll be frustrated. So when we just go ahead and increase the timing, I mean, this is one aspect that we need to consider. Let's not just go ahead and say, oh yeah, okay, 1 minute, let's wait. No, maybe not. Maybe not the best strategy. So we might have to think about that. What else? I think, yeah, I definitely think logs will help, and that will help us isolate like which conditions this problem actually occurs in, um, and that will eventually help us determine whether like it's just the test issue or it's like a race condition type of issue on the application, and how to deal with it. So it's not just a very simple way to say, yeah, okay, do 4 things and you get rid of it. It's not really like that. It takes some time and effort. This is my thoughts. What do you think?
I remember. Yeah, thanks. I remember reading, or I know from James, parts of a test. Now, in the RST namespace, Rapid Software Testing namespace, we don't call what automation does as a test. We call right. So
Yeah.
I'm talking about a test. So components of a test would be configuration, operation, observation, and then evaluation. Right. Now, I'm trying to connect this with Flaky and see, are there factors which can be tuned to get non-flaky tests, like in terms of configuration. What configurations have we tried? Right? Which configuration gives you most flakiness?
Right.
Is it directly proportional? Is it directly related? Operation-wise, which ones have you touched upon? Now, which is related to what you said about the locator strategies, right? Observation is again related to what you mentioned about the logs.
Yeah.
Like, where are we observing? How much are we observing? What are we observing? Right? Evaluation then again comes back to, okay, is it the right At the end, we could do a lot of things just because, again, we can do, but then are those the things that should be done?
Mm.
As you mentioned, 30 seconds, yes, we got the element, but who will wait for 30 seconds? So, yeah, I can relate to these. I mean, as soon as you mentioned that, those four things, then I was like, oh, it relates so well with a configuration operation, which you can modify to get what you want.
Mm.
What do you think?
I think you're right. So I had not really read about this one earlier, component software test, but yeah, I think it makes sense what you just said, and it's a very nice way to think about it. Uh, it sort of it gives us like broad level points to think about, and then we can just dive into all of these, investigate more, and then finally evaluate, come to the point where we're evaluating. So I like this idea, something that we could definitely do in our projects.
Right. So I think we'll try to stick to that 45 minutes limit. So I know we can keep on talking, we can keep on discussing about all of these questions. So let's have it for the next session.
Okay.
And everyone for
Okay, Ajay, I lost you again, but I think you're saying thank you, everyone. I'll just give 1 minute for you to maybe just pause and start your video again, if that helps. Not sure. Okay, I think we lost Ajay, but all right. So just want to say thank you everyone for watching. We would really love to have your comments about what you think about flaky tests and what you think about these other questions that we just discussed. So, what would you do if you are in this kind of a situation? If you are, let's say, uh, haven't really done much of automation in your career but would want to get to that, and to share your experiences as well. And we would love to hear your thoughts about test pyramid, your thoughts about flaky tests, and do share them in the comments. And if you have some questions for us that you would like us to talk about more or talk about in general, then please do add that as well. And well, if we do not know, we will learn about it, and we will thank you for asking that question and letting us know that we probably don't know about it. Okay, thank you very much.
right. Sorry, there was the flaky network connection, and right, so I got disconnected. So I hope you summarized what all we discussed today.
Oh, not quite. So, okay, let me go through it again. I just said if you have some experiences for this, then do share with us. But yeah, so today we mainly spoke about what we can do if we are, let's say, have some experience but not much of experience in test automation. So Ajay gave some great examples where he said, well, uh, automation is also a project, and our experience is invaluable. It's not a waste. So we will be able to, still contribute in a lot of other areas like maybe planning, communication, estimation, raising flags, highlighting, and so on. And don't give up, just keep learning, accept that maybe we don't know, but then learn and don't be scared of it. We spoke briefly about test automation pyramid. So we said we spoke about why it would be nice to have more tests at the lower level and the advantages of that. And we spoke about how when there are tests at higher level, it could be flaky. We spoke more in detail about what flakiness would means to us and what we can do to analyze it further and see how we can reduce the flakiness. And this was a nice thing that Ajay mentioned from RST, where he spoke about configuration, operation, observation, and evaluation. We could use these things to also understand why certain tests are flaky and deep dive into it, understand the reasons, observe, evaluate it, and just figure out whether what changes we are doing is it right or wrong, and what more can we do, what can we make, how can we make it better.
Perfect. That was great. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And see you all in the next session.
See you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.